Hi guys, this is Eric with the Film Photography channel, and today we're here to talk about the world's greatest 35mm camera, the Leica M3. The Leica M3 is this legendary camera. It's Leica's first bayonet mount camera, and it was built from 1954 through 1967. Okay, and just to kind of put it in perspective before I really get into the review, for fun here, let's look at the pricing of this camera, because this was a camera for the rich. Okay, this was not a commoner's camera or some middle income person's camera. Basically, it was for rich people. They're the only ones that could really afford it. All right, to put that into perspective a little bit, this camera, the Leica M3, bundled with, and they were always bundled. There wasn't any body only back in those days. They always came with a lens. But you can get this in a 50mm 3.5, which is not the fastest of lenses. Back in those days, it's okay, but still, you could have gotten faster even then. But a 50mm LMR 3.5 in 1954 would have cost you $348. Okay, doesn't sound like a lot. Just to kind of put it in perspective, that would be $2,825 today. With a little bit better lens like this one, the 50mm Summicron, which is the f2, $447, which is $3,600. And with the 1.5, it would have cost back then $468, which is around $3,800 if you account for inflation. So suffice it to say that this is a camera for the wealthy, especially back then. I mean, we're talking, I don't know what else you could have got for $450, maybe a car or something back then. The Leica M3 is a rangefinder camera, which means that, and it's Leica's first combined rangefinder. The camera that preceded this, the Leica 3F, like Roman numeral 3, small f, had a kind of similar setup. You had the focusing window and the rangefinder or the viewing window. The difference with the 3F versus this one, and what made this one so unique, it was the first camera to combine the two. The first camera that Leica made to combine the two. So this little window here superimposes a rectangle, basically the same shape as this window, in the middle of this. Okay, so when the photographer is looking through there, in the center of this, beautiful bright viewfinder, you're going to see this little rangefinder patch. And a couple things about just the rangefinder in general for this camera. It's Leica's highest magnification rangefinder to date. The cameras that Leica sells today, they still don't have the 0.91 times magnification viewfinder. So that's noteworthy. The reason for that, the reason the viewfinder was such a high magnification, is because this camera was tailor-made or really suited for a 50mm and higher lens. I believe 50, 90, and 135 is what this camera was kind of designed for. You could, of course, use a 35mm. You'd have to put these goggles. What I do with them? These are not, just to kind of show you what they look like. The goggles are this little item that goes on top right there, and in the case of the 35mm, this would be like a little wide-angle lens, and the same thing for the focusing patch there, or the focusing patch. So when the user looks through the viewfinder, you'd have a wider field of view suitable for a 35mm lens. But that's something they came up with later as people started wanting to have a wide-angle lens with this camera. But natively, you've got a 50mm, the full frame. As you're looking through the viewfinder, it's perfectly suited for 50. If you mount a different lens, like let's say a 90, then you'll get the 90mm frame line. So the frame lines will. Now the rangefinder, or the viewfinder rather, everything stays the same except for you'll get a square that will let you know what the what the 90mm lens's field of view would be, and then same for the 135mm. Okay, now one kind of neat thing about this camera, it'll never show you like, you know, both at the same time, like a 90mm frame line and the 135. Some of the Leicas do, and some other rangefinder cameras that I've used will do that as well. It's a little bit distracting. I think the M6 did that, and I actually, when I had my M6 CLA'd, I actually had them, or he suggested that I remove that feature or that distraction. So I've got an M6 with a viewfinder that works like this camera. But it kind of just goes to show the M6 came out years and years after this camera did. And, you know, there's actually an improvement available to make it more like this camera, which I think is again, noteworthy. All right, and let's just go over the body a little bit. Okay, beautiful engraving on this top plate. All right, very simple design. You've got your shutter speed, you've got your aperture ring, and you've got your film advance, film rewind, cold shoe, and on the back you've got the P or the bulb sync and like X sync through PC cables. Okay, that's how you would go about using flash on this. But let me tell you, nobody uses a flash on a Leica. The film advance or the film counter window it's you know, just nice, bright, you know, big, very legible from a fair distance. The shutter speed, a couple of things about this shutter speed dial, and we'll see if we can get in close on that. This shutter speed dial reads from 1 second to 1/1000th of a second. The 1/1000th is kind of noteworthy because, you know, a lot of cameras of its in that day would max out at either 350, 400, or 500. There weren't a lot that actually went to 1/1000th, so that was a big deal. If you'll notice, there's a little notch right there. Okay, that little notch is designed to link up with this guy right here. Okay, it has a corresponding tab somewhere right here on this wheel. Okay, and what this does, this is the Leica meter, one of several different Leica meters produced. This one is the MR, and I'm not very well versed on the differences between the Leica meters. I know this one takes a battery. I know there's some that were like selenium cells that had all the like the bubbles on the front, and those don't ever need a battery. There's just a cell that's light sensitive. Okay, so but what this Leica meter would do is give you automated metering. Okay, because the camera doesn't have a built-in light meter. And I'm gonna get back to this here, but I'm just kind of showing you the bodies, the you know, parts of the body at this point. The rewind knob right here, you notice there's two red dots right there in the center, and that's just a way for you to kind of confirm that the film is properly loaded and that it's advancing properly, that it's actually moving properly. Right in the front there, this is the little knob switch you hit when you're ready to rewind the film. You just rotate it and then start rewinding. Self-timer, pretty common cameras of the day. You get that watch movement type of, you know, a self-timer deal, and then it would take the picture. This is the frame line selector, but what this little knob does here is, as you're looking through the viewfinder and you hit it in towards the body, you get the 90mm frame lines, and if you hit it this way away from the body, you get the 135mm frame lines. Is like, let's say you're using a 90, and you know, the preview lever is just, you know, I've got a 50 on here right now, but the preview lever kind of lets you see what your photo would look like if you had a different lens on there. If you mount the 90, then the 90 frame lines will come up and will stay, and then the switch will show you some other frame lines. But yeah, what's kind of neat about that is that you still have the entire view of the viewfinder, so you can kind of see what's coming in and out of frame, or as you're composing, you say, okay, this isn't in my frame, but that's maybe I want to include that in the photo. Let's go ahead and load this thing. Now, if you look at the bottom plate, there's a tripod socket on one end and this is your release lever, release knob, whatever you want to call it, on the bottom. This pops out, as you can see, and then it's about a half turn. Yeah, half turn, and the entire bottom plate comes off, which is completely different than any other camera that I've seen. Most of the cameras of its day, and 35mm cameras of its day, and further into the future, they always had the whole back that pops open, and that's supposed to have been a better way to do it, but I tend to disagree. I really like this system. I load this system very easily. I don't have any problem loading it. I've owned Leicas for a long time, so maybe that may have something to do with it, but it's nowhere near as hard as as some folks might think it is. All right, so the first thing you got to do, got your film, take out the spool. This is your take-up spool, okay? And I'll show you how this works. It's actually a pretty smart system. All right, when you push it through, you see how that arrow starts to appear? You see that? Okay, that's just to let you know, okay, you're in there far enough. Once the entire arrow appears, and it's just a series of holes in there, and the beige color of the film contrasts with the black take-up spool, and then you can see the arrow. All right, so this is basically what it looks like when you're ready to load it, right? Then you go back to the camera, okay, and you make sure you've got enough film, enough slack. You throw it in there. This is easy, right? All right, put your spool in there, okay? Put both of them in there. Make sure you push this till it clicks, and what that does, it does a couple things. It'll secure the take-up spool in there, but it will also reset your film counter, which is a neat little piece of engineering. If you notice here, this is the bottom plate again. See the hole there? Mates up with that. Put that in there, and you get a nice tight seal. I mean, I don't know if this camera is technically weatherproof or splash proof, but I mean, the tolerances on this camera is just everything's just so tight and really well engineered. And anyway, to finish, you do your half turn, fold the switch back in, where it fits nice and flush with the bottom plate, and you're ready to roll. Okay, so I'm looking at the film counter now, and it's showing -2. So I'll roll once, then that was like a half a turn, and then once again, and now I've got completely unexposed film in the camera. One of the really iconic things about this camera is the sound that the shutter makes. It's got this just a quality, tightly engineered, sound, and I'll let you hear that now. Okay, and this is, let's set it at a couple different speeds. We'll go with 1/1000th, and this is a cloth shutter. It's not a leaf shutter. It's a cloth shutter that slides back and forth there. But I mean, you hear that sound. It's iconic Leica shutter sound, and that's one of the things that made this camera famous. It's just so quiet and so smooth and so well designed. This is 1/160th. You see, it starts to separate a little bit, and let's go all the way down to half a second. Okay, so that kind of just gives you and the film advance is just super smooth. It's just so tight and so well controlled. When you advance the film, it's just really nice feeling. It just makes you feel like you're using a really well-made quality product. Okay, something very special about this camera. Okay, so moving on. The lens that I've got on here is the Summicron, which makes it an f2, 50mm DR dual range. And let's go back to the goggles here. In the case of these goggles, with this lens, what these goggles do is they allow you to focus a little bit closer than what you normally would. Okay, if you look at the focusing knob here, there's a little notch right there that stops the regular focusing range. Okay, so from 1 meter, I believe it is, through infinity, this is where you're focusing, right? Okay, the neat part and what makes this a unique lens, the DR part of it, the dual range part of it, you pull up on the focusing ring, right? Spring loaded, and then you go past the notch. But now you can't go anywhere. You see that the focusing is locked. Here's where the magic happens. Okay, you get your goggles and you put them on here, and they won't go on otherwise. If the lens is not in that position, these goggles won't go on there. Okay, goggles mount on, and let me show you something here just real quick. You see the ball bearing? Okay, this ball bearing is what releases the focusing ring. Now from this position, this lens will focus about, looks like around 15 inches, less than half a meter. Yeah, less than half a meter. I think 15, and I might look it up. But compared to 3 feet. So it's not macro by any stretch, but it's definitely close focusing, and like I said, but you lose the capability to focus to infinity, okay, with the goggles on and the dual range system engaged. Okay, this lens is super sharp, and I don't mean it's sharp for a lens of its day. I mean it's sharp compared to any lens out there that I've ever used, and I've used a lot of lenses. I compare this to the Nikon 55mm micro, the AIS lens, the 2.8, which is probably one of the sharpest lenses on the planet. That's how good this lens is. And again, this is a 1950s era lens. Okay, this lens actually was designed, and this is something I've never seen anybody do. You may have this lens and not know this lens is actually capable of doing this. This bayonet mount lens is not a screw mount. It comes off. I don't know if you guys knew that. Okay, but this lens actually will come off the front part of it. And you ask why in the world would Leica design a lens to do that? Because this lens, this part of it, or this is pretty much the whole lens. The rest of this is just the lens body. There's no all the glass is contained, and because this thing, again, 1950s era lens, and there's no dust in this lens at all, not even minor dust. But yeah, this lens right here, this piece, was actually designed to fit in the Visoflex, which is a apparatus that Leica had. It was kind of like a close focusing deal, but yeah, it's let's screw it back in there and make sure it's on there nice and tight. All right, so, and to take the goggles off, you have to get back up to the notch, okay, to take these goggles off. If it's here, goggles won't come off. See that? If it's here where it's supposed to be, the goggles slide right off. Okay, and to get back to where you can focus to infinity, pull up on the ring, and then you're free to go past the notch, and the notch will keep you from entering the close focusing range again. You see that? All right, so now you're in regular focusing range where you wouldn't have the goggles on there anymore. Okay, you would just have the regular camera to use. I prefer to use this camera just like this. Okay, I have used the goggles, and I posted some pictures that just blew me away on Flickr, and I'll post some of them so you can see for yourself how they look. All right, so let's look at the Leica Meter. And again, this is the Leica Meter MR. Okay, don't know what MR stands for. Okay, so what you need to do to put this meter on the Leica M3, you set the camera to bulb, and you see where that puts the little notch. It puts the notch pretty much facing the back of the camera, and you want to match up the light meter itself also to bulb. Okay, you can see that it's on bulb, and what you do from that point, you see the cold shoe right there. See what's happening? The cold shoe will slide in here, and the shutter speed ring on the meter will dock with the shutter speed ring on the camera. And the only thing you really have to do is you kind of got to pull up on the shutter speed ring while you're installing it. But, yeah, so we slide it in there, and as long as you're on bulb, you're fine. So you pull up on it, and there it is. It mounts right in place. And this meter, it's kind of, and just kind of rotate this knob just to make sure that you're married up. And now you see when you turn this big ring here, it turns the shutter speed setting on here. The way this meter works, once you have it mounted on here and everything's ready to go, there's this button here, or it's just like a sliding switch. It just slides and bounces back. And keep your eye on the needle there, okay? What I did is just now is just to take a reading, okay? It's not like a regular meter and a camera that's constantly reading the light. When you hit that switch and let it bounce back, it takes a reading, kind of holds that reading. So what you do from that point, and by the way, this has a low setting, a low light setting, which is in red, okay? Low light setting, and then for daylight or for outdoors, you can rotate this over to the black, which is for brighter light. Okay. So anyway, we're indoors. It's pretty dim in here. So I took a reading on, under the red, and let's do it again towards some light. Okay. So I took a reading here, and you'll notice also that there's a red scale and there's a black scale on here. So obviously, if you're in the red, you want to use the red scale. And the red scale right now pointed, the needle is pointing toward right around 2.8 on the meter here. I don't know how well you can see all this stuff, but if you see, the needle is pretty much lined up with 2.8. And what you want to do from that point is you want your shutter speed, whatever that shutter speed is going to be, you want it also to be on 2.8. Let's say that, well, first thing you want to do is put your aperture ring. Okay, aperture is on 2.8. I did that here on the lens. I move the red scale, which shows aperture on this side. When I move that to 2.8, it corresponds with a shutter speed of 1/60th of a second, right? And I've tested this thing over and over again, and I'm completely blown away by how accurate it is. I mean, I would have no problem shooting Velvia or Provia and without ever second guessing this thing. This Leica Meter MR in particular has just been spot on. I mean, just flawless in terms of its accuracy, determining exposure. And I'm blown away by something that was built so long ago being as accurate as, my D810 or my Nikon F6, or which is known for its phenomenal metering. Here's another little tidbit. I'm going to try to explain this the best way that I can. Okay, this camera, being a rangefinder, right? Obviously, it doesn't look through the lens. That would be an SLR that looks through the lens. It looks through this rangefinder. So one disadvantage, possibly you could call it, is that how do you really look at depth of field? Well, obviously, you can use the depth of field scale, one easy way, and that's the most common way, because all these lenses of the day, they had a depth of field scale. That's one thing. But Leica came up with a pretty neat method using the rangefinder patch, going back to this guy here, that superimposes that rectangle in the middle of your viewfinder window as you're looking through there. Right, so you see how there's a little notch on the top, or a bigger notch on the top and a smaller notch on the bottom. And hopefully you know how rangefinder, or how these focusing patches work. It'll kind of, it'll show you like a ghost image of whatever you're looking at. And once you can get that ghost image to come together to show as one image, with just this little patch, whatever you're focusing on will be split. You'll have like a ghosting of whatever it is you're looking at. And at some point, as you turn your focus knob, ring rather, it'll line up and you'll have a solid picture with no ghosting. Okay, so what this tab up top does is, say if you want to see if something else is going to be in focus, but let's say you're taking a portrait of somebody, but you want to know if some object behind the person is going to be in focus. What you want to do is you put this top notch, and this top notch represents f16. This will be everything that's in focus through f16. That's why it's as wide as it is. The bottom notch is f5.6, which obviously will have lower depth of field, so that's why it's smaller. But again, you focus and then you recompose, and then you line up hopefully a vertical line, which would be easier to figure out. And if that vertical line is split within that notch there, then you know it'll be out of focus. If it's split a little bit, it's a little out of focus. If it's split a lot, that's a lot out of focus. And that's if you're around f16. If you're in f5.6, it's the same concept. But I thought that was a pretty genius way to use a rangefinder to determine depth of field. I hope that made sense. It's a little obscure fact. I haven't heard anybody else talk about that when they're reviewing their Leica M3. And I found it really interesting. Okay, so as you know, we loaded up some film in here earlier, and what I'm going to do is go through the whole roll here just to see where we end up. I want to demonstrate after you take a roll, and let's see where we end up. Oh, and by the way, this is a single stroke because again, this is a late serial number. Serial numbers in the over 1 million. The double stroke used to have to do something like this. I used to, let's see if I can imitate a double stroke. But this one will advance the whole, the whole frame just in one stroke. But the double stroke is just that you have to hit it twice to advance. But that was compared to like the 3F and all the previous Leicas. You actually had to turn a knob here. So this was the first Leica with a film advance lever, which was again another genius piece of engineering. But let me show you just how neat the rest of this is here. When you're finished your roll, let's see where we are. All right, we're getting there. We're like at 35. Okay, so that's where I ended up. Now let's see, 38 photos. Okay. All right, if you can see that, 38 photos from this 36 frame roll, which is kind of nice. So when you go to, and let's get rid of the Leica meter, because again, I like this thing nice and compact. I don't really care for the meter that much, but it is handy if you're shooting slide film. Okay, so when it's time to rewind, you've taken up the whole roll. You hit this knob here, and then you raise up this knob, the film rewind knob. Okay, raise it up till it clicks, right? And then very simple. You start just rewinding it. Nearly all cameras, they have a little lever that flips out, and then you're doing this, and then your fingers inevitably always slip off the lever, and it's whatever. This is actually a better system. It's no great chore to not have that little pop out lever, but I'll tell you another little neat tidbit here in terms of Leica engineering. This knob never bounces back. You see that? It rolls and it stays. The little lever, as soon as your finger slips off, what does it do? It rolls back with the film. The film catches it. So it's really just brilliant that they, small thing, but they engineered this so the film doesn't ever bring the knob back. You just continue to rewind it, right? And you'll come to a point. I don't know if you can hear it rewinding in there, but it's rewinding in there. And once you get to a point, you hit, once you have the film rewound all the way, but still attached to the take-up spool, you get a little resistance there. And that's exactly what I've got now. So, but it's only for a second. You see that? You turn that until it feels loose again. And what happened is the film was pulled out of that little, the little connection it had to the take-up spool. So what you have now, and you folks that develop your own film will love this, is the film. You see the notch there? The film is rewound to the correct position for developing. Okay? With the leader still out. My beat up film roll that I use for every camera demo that I use. But yeah, this is exactly where you want the film to be, so you can easily load it in your take-up spool without any drama, without having to use a can opener to open this thing up, and that's just one less thing that you have to concern yourself with. It just kind of speaks to how well thought out this camera is. I mean, when you have something as simple as the film rewind knob that doesn't, you know, bounce back with the film, and it has that feeling so you know when you're how to leave your film leader out. I thought it was just a cool cool little piece of engineering. So make sure that your back door is nice and tight. Marry up this hole with this notch, and believe me, if I was and see if it's nice and tight, just really well engineered. If I wasn't sitting here trying to show you how to do it, this is like, you know, muscle memory for me. I mean, loading the film, closing the back. I mean, it happens without me even thinking about it at this point. I've been using these cameras for quite a while. So guys, this is, if you're looking for a Leica, get this, okay? Get the M3. M3s are absolutely wonderful cameras. I owned an M6 for years, and I've never really was looking for it. But when I picked it up, I had to have it. I said, man, I thought my M6 was a well-engineered machine, and it is. M6s are great. They're really well put together, but this thing is just on another level altogether. And it's so odd that a company would make their very best product the first time and kind of go slightly downhill thereafter. It's just kind of odd, but that's what Leica did. I mean, so this is it, guys, the Leica M3. Okay, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.